When someone decides to quit drinking, Alcoholics Anonymous is often the first and sometimes only option they've heard of. But what if AA doesn't align with you? Recovery isn't one size fits all, and what works for one person may not work for another. In today's episode, we're talking with guests who found that AA wasn't exactly what they needed. Some supplemented it with other support, while others didn't connect with it at all. If you're struggling to find a recovery path that truly fits you, this episode is full of insight and alternative options to help you move forward.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Julie and Steve. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full there's no space left for alcohol.
If you've tried different paths of recovery and haven't found one that seems like the right fit, we encourage you to get in touch to talk about what one-on-one recovery coaching looks like. It includes a weekly plan tailored to your challenges, plus support throughout the week and exercises to keep you active in your recovery. You can get more information about the coaching services offered by Julie and Steve at throughtheglassrecovery.com.
All right, welcome everybody. We've got Rachel, Rich, and Joanne with us today. This is going to be kind of a cool conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think this is a conversation that needs to happen more than it probably does. So thank you three for showing up with us today. We're going to do intros before we actually dive into it all, and I'm going to let Rich start us off.
Oh man, I thought it was ladies first. I'll go. Um, Rich Sullivan, 53 years old, sober since 2012. My sobriety date is 12/17/2012. Um, I'm a real estate agent in Metro Atlanta. Married, live here on the south side of Atlanta, and I'm just a football fan. I love broadcasting. I love social media. I love great people, good food, and just happy to be back on with you guys. Appreciate the invite as always.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. I totally made you go first because you're like the one who's been here enough times. You know the drill. For our listeners, just so you guys know, if there's someone you're wanting to actually like catch up with, Rich has been on several episodes in the past. There's a search feature on our website now because I finally figured out how to put it on there, and you can actually type somebody's name in the search feature and it'll pull up all of the episodes that they've been on. So make sure you check that out. And Rich, thanks so much for coming back. I'm going to let Joanne go next.
Yeah, hi. So I am Joanne. I am living in the broader Houston metropolitan area. I am a person in long-term recovery, which for me means that in May of 1991, I got sober and have had a continuous sobriety since then. So it'll be 34 years this year around. And when I was about 15 years sober, I returned to school when my life in sobriety crashed and got a master's and then later a doctorate and became a clinician specializing in co-occurring disorders, substance use disorders. So I'm a person in private practice for that, as well as an executive sober coach where I teach professionals, executives, managers, and other high functioning and high achieving people how to manage stress and enjoy life without alcohol.
Awesome. Really cool. I love your story and just all the things that you've accomplished on your journey. So really happy to have you back. And last but not least, we have Rachel, who is joining us for the first time. It's so nice to meet you. And yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you so much. My name is Rachel Collins. I live in Maryland, both a business owner and a therapist. So I have a small group practice with a bunch of therapists, and it's really fun. I really enjoy my job. I have been sober for a year and a half, so I'm more of the newbie in the group. It's been a great journey. I'm still learning a lot and really excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, we're really, really happy to have you and glad you're able to join us. So, for the topic, Alcoholics Anonymous is often the only option that people are aware of when they decide to begin a path towards sobriety. And of course, there's no denying that AA is exactly what some people need. We aren't here to knock AA at all, but we do think it's important to have a conversation about what happens when AA doesn't feel like it fits, because every person is different with different beliefs, different backgrounds, and different needs. So, what was your experience like in AA? And how did you know that it was time to move on or to add other methods of recovery into your practice? What ended up being the right answer for you? And it is now a free for all, and somebody can start and we'll see what happens.
The sticky subject. Go for it.
Yeah, I'll start. In 1991, AA was really the only peer support. Women for Sobriety, I think, existed. It came about in the 70s, but without Google, who knew, right? That's like, how did we find things out back then? I don't know. But my mom had gotten sober in 68 through AA. And I actually had to approach her and my dad for help with an attorney for a DUI I had gotten. And in exchange for that check, she told me I needed to go to one AA meeting a week for the next 3 months. And I told her in my 25-year-old adolescent attitude that drinking was her problem, not mine. And the woman had 20 something years of sobriety at the time, and wisely just knew that when I got to AA, they would told me to keep coming back, right? Which is what they did. And it was fine for me until it wasn't. Um, for me, the first barrier to success there was that I met the person who was going to be my kid's dad in AA, and we started having children. I had 3 of them, and at that point, I realized that my primary recovery skill, which was at that point meetings, was not accessible anymore. My then husband traveled. I had 3 closely spaced kids, and I couldn't go to all of those meetings, but the messages I was being told were, well, you drank every day, you could go to a meeting every day. Well, a lot of cliche advice from people who weren't living my life, right? I got sober at 25, no kids, single, didn't own any property to speak of. And so I was going to walk through all adult seasons of life sober, and some of the cliche cookie cutter, almost reflexive suggestions literally were not a fit for me anymore.
Yeah, for me, I think it was just it didn't stick. I didn't make it a priority. By the time I went to my first meeting, it was because I met sober people and they kind of told me to come with them. But at that time, I'd already been sober for 6 months and I felt kind of comfortable in it. So I just think my schedule is really busy and I had gotten sober a different way. Luckily, a year and a half ago, there were other options other than AA. There's a lot of quit lit out there, and I went on a quit lit binge reading books about it. I decided to change my mindset around it. I had this inner voice in me that just kept telling me, your life is never going to be what you want it to be if you don't stop drinking. And I couldn't ignore that voice anymore. So I read about something, it's like spontaneous sobriety. I feel like that happened to me. I just decided and I felt really comfortable with that decision. I'm not saying it was hard. I didn't really have anyone supporting me, and I had to actually go seek out sober friends because they didn't do AA. And they all had taken the AA path. each one of them. So I will go to meetings when they have a year milestone, 2 years, and I'll go listen to their story, and I very much enjoy it. But I just never made it like a regular thing in my schedule. And that's a little bit about kind of why I didn't go to AA on a regular basis.
I want to ask you a question really quick. You brought up something really important. The one of the huge benefits of AA is the friendships, right? Because when you quit drinking, you have to leave behind a lot of your friends. And AA or whatever group it is kind of hands you a whole new group of friends. So you said that you had to go out and seek sober friends. I'm guessing there's gonna be some listeners who are like, how do you even find them? Because it's hard to do. So what did you do? How did you find friends?
I got really lucky. I don't know how this happened. I found this group. Someone had posted it in a mom's group I was in. It was like Sober Girls of Maryland. And I joined the group. And it was like right when I started to get sober. And it was this Facebook group. And then everyone started to branch out because Maryland is not a huge state, but it's you want to kind of have friends in your area. So they started to branch out into different sections of Maryland, and I decided to head up the one in my county. And
There's some courage.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I've always been good at like leading groups, so I was like, why not just do this? So I got so lucky. I found these 3 good friends that we just all clicked. Another one's a psychologist, I'm a therapist. Like they're all like these wonderful women, and we go to dinner once a month, and we're trying to gather more people to like be in our little sober group. Some have been sober longer than others. I think I'm the shortest amount of time in that particular group too. But it's been amazing to have supportive people. And I think that is one thing I would have missed out on had I not fallen into this. I think that would have been very lonely. So some of them found each other through AA. So I think it is a good way to find like a support group and meet other people.
That's a really good point, and I love that. I know just recently somebody started a Facebook group in our area called like the Sober Tribe of GJ or something like that. And so I think Facebook, looking on social media, is a great way to try to find local in-person groups of sober people. Go for it, Rich. What you got?
Yeah, so I have, I got two real incarnations of my story that involve AA. One of them is more around Joanne's time, early, mid 1990s, sober, going to a lot of meetings. This is up north in Boston and really diving in. I loved the sense of community that AA provided. It gave me a place to go on Friday and Saturday night. It kept me out of trouble. If I wanted a place to go where there was nobody drinking, AA was the place that I could go and nobody was drinking. And then in 1996, the Olympics were here and I relapsed, and the next 17 years were spent drinking. And when I finally realized that I couldn't do this anymore, as as Rachel was just alluding to, that I just had to do it. It was going to have to be something that if I wanted to live a good life, I was going to have to stop drinking. I went to AA only because that was all I was familiar with. And I luckily had the experience of, prior experience in AA. So I kind of knew a little bit how to navigate my way through it. But I believe it to be really quite intimidating. And I understand why people are a little bit afraid of walking into a room full of strangers. And they say it's anonymous, but I mean, really, it's anything but. I mean, people can find out who you are, pretty easily. And there's a little bit of an intimidation that can happen around that. But I was able to do the take what you need and leave the rest thing actually pretty well, and to navigate away from the things that I thought were not helpful to me and to lean into the things that I thought that were good. And I actually did have a sponsor who I worked with on this, current incarnation of sobriety. It was a great little group. It was a secular group. They didn't like the spiritual and religious aspects of AA, so they kind of exempted themselves from that in some way, and they welcomed everybody. So I liked that environment that I was in, and I believe it to be something that's really effective. I think that effective for the right people, effective for the people who need it. And there's a specific type of person who is going to go into AA and really latch onto it and thrive. And then there's other people for whom it's just going to fall flat and they're just not going to understand it. The great thing about the time that we live in now is there are many options. And I really learned about some of those other options watching my wife get sober. My wife was a drinker when I first met her, but was, I guess, somewhat attracted to me because I was sober and she kind of wanted that for herself. And I didn't take on the role of, savior or anything to her. I didn't, tell her how to do it or anything like that. I watched her get sober, and I watched her get sober using a women's group on Facebook and Marco Polo. There was a Marco Polo group for those who remember that old app. Maybe it's still around, who knows?
It is.
But seeing the way that these women supported one another and the progress that my wife was making, it just got me to thinking about how many different ways there are to do this, and that AA does not have a monopoly on this idea of changing your life for the better by quitting drinking.
I love how you talked about the intimidation. That was something that, I've been sober for just under 4 years. In a couple more months, I'll be at the 4-year mark. But it was intimidating walking into a room full of people, like right off the bat, when you think about it, walking into a room full of people that are just like I was. But I don't know that when I first go and do that. You know what I mean? I don't. You don't really get that sense until you walk in. And you're right. There is a sense of community there. And when I got sober and everything was online. I didn't drive to a meeting and meet people in person. My AA experience is in these little boxes on Zoom. And so because it lacks some of the human experience, in person sort of thing, the conversations after a meeting, there's no conversation after, there's no community after, you don't talk to anyone after. It's a 1-hour meeting, it's shut down, and all I did was get my 5 minutes. I listened to everybody else's experience, but I got my 5 minutes to share my piece, but it felt like it fell into the void. Like it falls into this void of people and everybody else's shares. And I'm not saying that I didn't learn a lot of things. AA was an instruction manual. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And you can mess around and jump through however many, whatever step you're talking about in the conversation or what you're working through. But it felt like an instruction manual, and it was a great foundation for what my recovery was going to look like. There was still for me something missing. I was missing the connection piece. I was missing some sort of feedback, authentic conversation. And I had a sponsor, but I never had these conversations where I would actually talk about a problem and get feedback on my problem that wasn't like, and this is going to sound bad when it comes out of my mouth, but I'm going to say it anyways, wasn't a regurgitation of some sort of, this is what you're supposed to do from the book. Like, that's not related to my life right now. I want to talk about this situation in a way that I can relate to, not that comes from an interpretation of literature, if that makes any sense. And so we're getting a lot of head nuts. So, like, I wanted something more personal. And when it came out of the literature, it felt like it was impersonal. And so I eventually found another group where I connected through a conversation rather than, like, when I was sharing, somebody would interrupt me and say, "What about this?" and give me ideas and give me thoughts. Like, AA was the first thing that I thought that I knew existed because it's been around for so long. But there is, Julie, you almost got like a,
No, I was just gonna say you found another group. You found a group that's not AA. You found I think that's just worth clarifying. You found a group that are doing something different.
yeah, I found a group that was doing something different, and I investigated it. And in that investigation, I found something that was a lot truer to me rather than just following this. It didn't feel authentic to me. There was something about it that just didn't click. I knew sobriety was important to me, and I knew recovery was important to me, and I knew I had to, like, get over my own shit. I had to get over myself. those things were things that were going to be integral to me becoming a better me. How that happens, and Rich, you touched on it, like AA doesn't have a monopoly on it. How that happens is going to be kind of like a discovery path of your own.
Well, and two, like, I think now it's great because there's so many different angles and aspects of the sober world, and one of the huge ones is the health and wellness, part of it. There are all kinds of people who are coming to being non-drinkers who don't even, admittedly probably don't even have problems, or, they wouldn't appear to have any sort of problem with it, but they're just there because they've learned that alcohol is poison, and it's now their conviction, and they want to be part of this movement. And I think it's just about finding where you're supposed to be, and finding the people who are the right people to be around you. And like, to anybody who is attending AA regularly and that's their thing, and they believe AA to be true, I think that the lion's share of those people would tell you that the people of AA are what is most important to them. Like, that's how they get their help. They get their accountability, they get their validation, they get their friendship and all that from that. But again, it goes back to, they don't have a monopoly on that. And, the book, the AA Big Book, which everybody points to, that's only one or two people's perspectives. And it includes a number of stories in the back. But,
Mhm.
we can learn from each other. But just because that book was written by one person doesn't mean that it's going to be the carbon copy of exactly the way to do it for everybody.
Yeah. So what did you guys, Rachel, you talked a little bit about, you did some quit lit and you found the group that you found. Rich and Joanne, what else did you guys add in, or how did you find things to bring into your life to like start meeting all of those needs? Because once we realize that once we decide to get sober, then we're like, oh my God, there's so much to figure out, right? So what did you guys do? Like I'm guessing you probably looked around and found resources and pulled them in. And what did that process look like?
So for me, it's looked differently according to different seasons of life and demands in terms of family. Those three kids that I talked about are now 30 through 26. And I have two grandsons and a encore career that's probably in its adolescence. And so over the decades, it's looked different. Rich mentioned that if you asked people in AA, they would say it's the people. And I don't disagree, but I've spent most of my time in sobriety in Texas, where there's a significant percentage of people who would say it's a higher power. And in Texas, the flavor of that is very much um, leans towards a traditional understanding of a higher power or a deity. Um, and so as I began to kind of, I in full um, transparency and vulnerability, I deconstructed my faith in sobriety and later deconstructed my relationship with 12 step. And so the tools that I began to rely on when I was unable to go to all of those meetings, and I was finding those, well, the first part of the big book, Rich was talking about, to be increasingly a miss for me. And I don't want to go on a feminist rant, but it was just not a, it was just not a fit. I began to develop routines and habits that ultimately were evidence-based and supported by research to change and sustain changes in the brain. And did that include social connectedness? Absolutely. It also included a contemplative practice. It also it included um, reflective practices that were not shame-based or shame-inspired.
Mhm.
Um, and learning that I don't need to feel bad in order to get better. And so for me, professionally, that shows up in a positive psychology and strengths-based approach. And so introducing tools that are known to support wellness and thriving pretty much regardless of your particular bodies and life's challenges.
I know the science behind the drinking and the reasons that our brains react the way they do and our bodies respond the way they do. And just having the knowledge to like understanding why that happens is for some people that's exactly what they need. So I know like the book Alcohol Explained is one of my personal favorites. And that does such a good, clear, crisp job of explaining scientifically in words anybody can understand what is happening in the brain. And again, with everybody needs something different, right? So I know people who can read that book and they're like, I'm done. I'm never drinking again. And I'm so comfortable with that. And for other people, they're like, yeah, well, I know, but so yeah, there's so many different aspects to it. And I think there's a lot of value in it and exploring them.
When I talk to clients about the need for a tailored, curated, specific treatment plan, I talk about not everyone's treatment plan for MS or for breast cancer or for diabetes is the same. It depends on your age and your gender and your season of life and your vulnerability and environment. And there are common elements to the treatment plan for each of them, but that doesn't make the treatment plan absolutely specifically the same.
So
Mhm.
coming from an AA background, now 25% of my recovery was spent in the rooms. One of the books that Julie read really, really early on, Julie, what was it called?
Rewire?
Rewired.
Rewired by Erica Spiegelman. Yep.
Rewired by Erica Spiegelman. And it's a super short book. It's like almost reading the first 165 page or 164 pages of the big book, because that's essentially the big book, 164 pages. That's your instruction manual. She writes it, and it's relatable to that, especially if you come from an AA background, but it's written so very differently at the same time, but it's a very much an instruction manual for healing in a different way. But it covers all of the same aspects, but the words are different. One of them is authenticity, and the other one is, what's the
There's
one I always,
honesty, there's evolution is the one that
and
always catches you. And there's, like, time management, solitude, love, relationships, all of these different parts of your life that you need to look at and understand and address and heal in order to reach the point of being healed, which is what the 12 steps is kind of shooting for too, right?
and yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is, like, after reading that one myself too, it was very clear that you could say the same thing in a different way. That and Joanne, you talked about this. That was more strength based, right, and less shame inducing, and less like holding you down. You're stuck in this box. And this is how I felt. And I'm going to try and be careful, but I felt like it was a box to me. Like I must stay in this zone to be accepted in that family. And as soon as I started stepping out of the zone and I talked to them about it, I also felt the exclusion in the family. And when you read the literature, that's not part of it. It's very, very simple. It's not part of it at all. And so I began to feel excluded, even though I still showed up. And so there's the parts for me where actions started not matching words. And I'll say there was a little bit of resentment there. Like, we're going to go ahead and preach these things, but we aren't going to do them. And that gave me a sour taste, which gave me the opportunity to explore what other avenues of recovery felt like, because it was still the most important thing. Like, it was one of the lessons that I learned in AA that's kept me exactly where I am right now and helped me grow, is making your sobriety and your recovery the most important thing in your life, right? That gets drilled right into your head. And it was great. And it's been fantastic because of that, I can look at anything else that's difficult in my life and I have a path to figure it out, right? Because I've used the path to figure out something really, really hard. And I can use a lot of the lessons that I learned back then, plus the ones that I've learned through all of these other pieces and parts and puzzles that I've come to include in my life in recovery, that has just made it so much more fulfilling.
The lingo, the phrases, repeating the slogans over and over again. Uh, there's just a big amount of pressure, I think, that's put on people in AA to kind of, almost parrot that. I remember sharing and just feeling like, oh, I have to say, you know, the serenity prayer, or I have to say, live and let live, or whatever. Like I have to work that in somehow to kind of prove to these people that, I'm doing this the right way. And the truth of the matter is that, I was not drinking. I was not using. And that's really all I need to be focused on doing. And, it doesn't matter what I'm saying. It matters what I'm doing. But there's just so many other avenues. There's so many other ways now. And I just think that it's an exciting time that we live in, to where we can explore these things and people can get help in different ways and they don't have to feel completely uncomfortable and exposed because walking into an AA meeting, I would feel exposed sometimes, and it was humbling to be there. And, yeah, I'm glad that there's other options out there. I really feel like the social media conversation, discovering that people were talking about this online in great numbers, that really helped me because I could almost use that as a resource, as a way to engage with people, you know? And I have people who are all over this country. You guys, I got friends in Michigan, I got friends in Cal, all over the place. In the UK too, guys who I have like direct messages threads going with, and they're kind of working through stuff and we share. And that's great. And it just, there's an alternative. The goal here is to help get my life better and be of service in some way, shape, or form, which is a principle of AA, but I kind of take a different approach on it. I don't want to carry the message to anybody who doesn't want it, but I want to be able to listen to somebody who has some questions. And every once in a while, I'm pretty public about my sobriety. Every once in a while, somebody will reach out and they'll say, hey, I'm trying to quit drinking. Trying to quit drinking. And that conversation eventually dies down because I don't get in their face about what they need to do and not do, you know?
Right.
And I think that's not a very good thing to do to somebody who's in a position to, want to explore this next chapter of their life, hopefully.
Right. I think that the slogans that you're talking about, like the I know progress, not perfection, or whatever, to me, those are so dismissive. When I remember, like, I was posting on this app early on in my recovery, and I was like, I feel stuck. Like, I feel like, I need to be doing something and I don't know what to do. And somebody was just like, progress, not perfection, you're fine. I'm like, no, you're not hearing my words. Like, it felt so dismissive and that drove me crazy. I want to really quick. So, we're talking about Rewired, we're talking about AA, and one of the big tenets of just recovery in general is self-reflection and looking at the parts of our lives that need some work. Rachel, I'm going to put you on the spot. So I used Rewired. I dragged Steve along with me, and these two used a lot of AA for that. What have you done? And as a therapist, I feel like this could be a really interesting answer. But like, how did you find your way into a space of self-reflection? What did that look like?
Ooh, man. I went hard. I told you I've read a lot of Quit Lit. I read a lot of self-help. I also run a podcast on self-help, books that I read. So, I think you learn a lot by teaching others. And I got a really great therapist myself and really digged into I had a lot of healing to do. I had a lot of healing to do. I didn't realize how much I was masking with alcohol, till it all came undone. One of the first books I read was Quit Like a Woman, which has a very feminist edge, and I just cried my face off while I was reading that book. It just, like, undid me, and, then, I kind of got all the science behind it, but I still meet with my therapist weekly. We do things like EMDR, work on some things every week, and she's sober too, so she gets me in that way. But I definitely wanted to heal and I wanted to do the work. I didn't just want to like give up alcohol and leave it at that. I really wanted to figure out, you know, who I was and how I could heal.
That is like a gift to have found a sober therapist. As a sober therapist yourself, like that is like that's got to really make you feel seen, right? That's one of the things that helps us all, I think, is to feel really understood. That's cool. That's hard to find. So I'm glad that you were able to find that. That's cool.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Really neat.
It's one of the great things about community, and one of the great things that actually AA has is it has a community so large that regardless of whatever problem or situation you're dealing with, somebody probably knows somebody who has gone through something like you have. So you're a lot less alone. That was one of the things that, I mean, you can find that now, even 3 years later, because social media has boomed, especially the sober community, uh, finding people that are going through what you're going through somewhere. And the sober community in general, if you reach out to someone because you heard part of their story that related to you, and if you reached out to them and be like, "Hey, can you talk to me about this? Because I'm struggling with the same thing that you were struggling with, and you seem to be over it, and I am not." There is a very, very good chance that that person will sit down and help you work through that, just because the sober community is a community that loves to give back to itself.
For me, one of the books that I read maybe, right as my wife was starting to, get sober herself, and she read a couple of books. One of them was This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. And, I really admire that book, and it changed a lot of things in me in terms of my view of alcohol, because what she dove into in great detail in that book was alcohol marketing. And at the end of that book, I was like, "Oh my god, I bought in wholesale to this massive lie of, like, that alcohol was gonna make me cool, and it was gonna make me attractive and successful, and, like, it did all of those opposite things." No, it never delivered what it's promised, and Annie Grace explains it perfectly in her book, it wisdom does not have a gender, you know? Guys, if you find a book and it's written by a woman about this subject or any other, do not discount it, because there's wisdom coming from every place. You just got to find it. And I found that book. My wife found that book. It helped really cement for both of us in our own ways, our path forward.
I think one other thing I'm going to bring up really quick. So I've done this sober thing twice, kind of like Rich. I didn't have the 17-year epic relapse that you had. Mine was like a year, but I've done the sober thing twice. The first time, I did not tell a single soul that I was quitting drinking, other than my husband knew, but he knew that I was quit. He thought I was quitting for like health reasons, right? He did not know how hard it was every single day, for the first however many months. And I stayed sober for over a year, like 14 months, but I didn't do it with any support of any kind. And I live in a town of 300 people. So an AA is held on Friday nights at the medical center, and everybody knows that. And the medical center is on the one main road that goes through our town. So everybody knows why your car is parked there on a Friday night if they drive by. And like I needed my anonymity. At that point, I was really involved in like youth programs, and I was on the town council, and all the things. And like that was the last thing I needed, was for everyone to see my car there. So AA was very much not an option for me the first time around. The second time around, it was COVID. There were no AA meetings, so I found an online support group, not AA related at all. So I've actually never been to an AA meeting, which is why I'm asking questions.
You're
We're not really sharing.
you
I've been to
been to
I went
been to
to
my 1 year.
Steve's 1 year AA meeting on Zoom. I went to that one. But anyway, so the reason I'm saying all of this is I've talked to enough people that have done AA. I think the one thing that I learned the second time around, finding a community on Zoom, was connection is absolutely imperative to sobriety. It does not matter how you find it. AA is great for that. It's like, it's there for you. It's built in. But if AA isn't your thing, that is totally okay. You still need some people in your life, or at least a person in your life, that you can talk about so openly and honestly about, like, the really bad times when you're like all you can think about is drinking, or you're just crumbling and you don't have anyone to talk to. Like that's the most important thing for anybody getting sober, however you decide to do it, is you've got to have some amount of connection in your life where you can speak absolutely freely about alcohol and what you're going through. So I think that's the one thing that I've learned in relation to this whole conversation is we need, as humans, we need other humans. It's an absolutely imperative part of our lives and our recoveries.
Well, you're literally disconnected from yourself, which means you're disconnected from everyone else around you because I'm connected to a lie that isn't me. So then any sort of connection that I was getting or giving wasn't authentic in return because I was never giving it I was never real in the first place. So it's just a vicious cycle of fake getting, even if it was real in return, it was fake because it started out with a mask.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to bring up one aspect that can be a barrier to recovery for people. I 100% support what we call in the industry equifinality, multiple pathways to a happy, thriving sobriety. But I think we also have to acknowledge that for substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder, one of the symptoms of that is to put up barriers to healing, right? So the thought process will jump in there and say, "No, I can't do that because um, I'm a realtor in my town. I can't do that because there's 300 people in my town. I can't do that because in my case, I was too young." And it just will come up with our brains, and to protect our access to alcohol or dry goods, as I call them, um, it will come up with reasons why healing won't work. And that is true for AA for sure, but what I find with people I work with, um, is there could be a hesitation and reasons the other options won't work either.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean anything about it doesn't say anything about SMART, it doesn't say anything about Dharma recovery, Women for Sobriety, you know, all Happy is Sober, all the other Naked Mind, all of the other ones that speaks more to the aggressive strength of an alcohol use disorder. And it's important to meet that resistance with love, kindness, and understanding, but also honesty that right now, when you're on the other side of a sobriety date, your brain wants to protect your access to alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said, well explained. And you're right. Like I think, you can come up with an excuse to not try anything if that's what you feel like doing, right? And I don't even think we mean to. It's just natural. So
Yeah, I mean, I've heard objections to intentional gratitude, objections to meditation, mindfulness, exercise, good nutrition, developing sleep hygiene. Even developing an intentional stress management program. And so it's not just AA that people have objections to, but sometimes the objections to AA aren't because AA
Mhm.
Right.
isn't a fit for everybody, but because our brain wants to drink.
Yeah, that's a great point and really important.
Well, and the one thing I'll just add on top of that is how unique and special the podcasts around this subject are, because they're going to live forever and help people that we will never meet or know. So just these words that are being spoken today by you guys, incredible. And you've done so many episodes, and people do come to find this medium. How many times I think in my life was I, man, where do I get this information? Where are the people talking about it? Well, now it's just go to your podcast app, go to Google, whatever. It's there. The help is there. And when we add our own personalities and our own stories to it, it doesn't have to be in the box of an AA meeting. It can be a Zoom recorded podcast. It can be a Friday night or Monday night Zoom meeting with a handful of people sharing their stories. It's remarkable. And, I hope that these words echo and reach somebody, even just one person who might, change a habit as a result of this. And credit to everybody Really for, you too, Rachel, you said you do a podcast, just this is getting out there and helping people. Maybe not the number of people that we think that it is, but it's working.
I'm gonna finish this off here with AA for a lot of people can have a bad name. And that bad name comes from a very few select amount of people. I know this from my own experience because it got a bad name from a very few select people that use the program more as a place to stand on a pedestal as it is to just be in recovery. And that's what gives it a bad name. It's a closed heart, it's a closed mind instead of an open heart and an open mind to helping those others. And there's so many people that are in that program that have an open heart and an open mind. And it's just the very select few that do, because I know people that are in the program and they have amazing groups, and they have like there's more better ones than there is worse ones. And I think that is important to know, because there are so many different groups out there that if one doesn't fit because of personality, there's probably something else out there that does, if that's something that you're looking for. We all mentioned so many different ways of like quit lit and different recovery groups, and just having a person, open, vulnerable conversation, a therapist, like the list goes on now today. And I can imagine 25 years ago what that looked like, Joanne, as opposed to what it looks like now. And to see the environment be so different and so open-minded, and so many different, like science, so much more science too, to back it all up. It's got to be exciting coming from someone who's been there and done that. Even you, Rich, back in the 90s, like it's got to be really exciting to see so much different and so much open-mindedness and where sobriety's come. So I'm going to say thank you, Rachel, thank you, Rich, and thank you, Joanne, for coming on this podcast and talking about AA and how it worked for you and what didn't fit and those sort of things. It's a difficult kind of discussion to have without feeling like you're throwing the program under the bus, because there's three of us that are here that it's helped out, right? And we've all chosen a different path afterwards because we've found something in different ways and modalities that are helping us grow as a person. So I want to really thank you guys for coming on and sharing this, because it is a vulnerable conversation to have. And so I appreciate your time. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. We hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, please consider leaving a review or rating for us on whatever app you're listening from. Those go a long way in supporting the work we're doing. Thanks again, and we will see you next week.